our days, the feeling around Manchester City from Manchester City's side and also from the public, but also just outside in general side, seems to be growing one of animosity between a couple of different parties, but let's call it two. Man City against the world, right? Or the world against Man City, or something in between the two. And Pep Guardiola's press conference, in which he said some very entertaining stuff, as always Pep Guardiola will, is a show of, well, not exactly Man City's mentality, but some of the great ways that you can say things in football without pretty much saying anything, and at the same time, also not saying exactly what the journalist wants you to say. Welcome back to Laurence McKenna channel, the guy who says a lot without really saying anything. Sort of the brand. If you like it, click down there, hit the subscribe button. It's good to have you. We're hitting big numbers. We just hit 55k. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. I really appreciate it. And if you have been part of the journey from day one, I really appreciate it. If you want to help us get to 100k, bam, smash it. Pep Guardiola said some great things in his press conference, right? I mean, I can just take from, there's this great quote, right, at the very top. And journalists love to pick bits out and sort of reorder them and make it sound like stuff was said in different orders. But you remember, Man City have been charged with over 100 different counts of breaking the rules in the Premier League. Now, we can unpack this in many different ways. I must have watched 40, 50, 60 different videos now on many different YouTube channels, saturated to a degree of outrage. And also a degree of, I know best in this, all right, mate? So, I think the best thing we should do here is X. Just based on what I can sort of see, do you know what I mean? Anyway, he basically then spoke about the time when UEFA charged Man City with these charges of basically breaking FFP and not 100% being, should we say, transparent about what was going on at the club. He says, while we wait for UEFA to make a sentence against us, 9 teams, and here's the great bit, Burnley. He starts with Burnley. Wolves, Leicester, Newcastle. He drops Newcastle in there now, but remember Newcastle a little while ago? Nah. As if they cared back then. Spurs, Arsenal, Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, they wanted us out of the Champions League. They wanted that position. And at that time, obviously, if the ruling had gone, then Manchester United would have been the team, sort of the prevailing hegemonic power in the Premier League for many years, to take the spot off Man City, at least in the league. Weirdly, because I would have thought UEFA should punish the Premier League as well for not being able to keep tabs on those kind of people, but that's a conversation I want to have in a sec. It is said there are not enemies or friends, just interests. Ooh, the old, it's just business, eh? They want to put it out and take that position, but we want it on the pitch. Deliberately misinterpreting what, of course, the influence of money is on the football pitch. I'm not saying, I think if I met Pep Guardiola, we get on. I feel like we'd actually, I'd like him. I don't know if he'd like me, but I quite like him. I feel like he seems like good company. He seems like the kind of guy you want at a dinner party. Maybe a little intense for a whole dinner, but if he lets the group talk, sure. They say you have to be out of the Champions League. You have to go to League One or League Two, or maybe the Conference. Pep Guardiola loves this, and this is one of my favourite things. If anyone out there has ever been to counselling or has ever spoken about, and obviously in my own job as a podcaster, but I've sort of studied different kinds of, and not in any deep way, different kinds of ways that you can manipulate people through speech. So, people misleading you in some way, so that when I'm on a podcast, I can go, oh, yeah, well, actually, maybe you're not 100% saying that the way that I would say it. You're manipulating the truth in a way. He's very good at painting a very extreme picture of what people want. So, they want us in the Conference, mate. Yeah, we should go all the way down, should we? Ridiculous guy. Pep Guardiola's very good at this. He's very good at making an argument sound ridiculous, straw manning sometimes, slippery sloping people, basically doing A-level or even GCSE critical thinking. We have already been in the lower divisions, he reminds us. Man City come from humble beginnings. That clip's been doing the rounds, hasn't it? That clip of that guy on that show sitting opposite Robbie. Of course, Robbie, has always been the bastion of... obviously, that guy's been doing the rounds with the clip. well, I was the stadiums were full, and everyone, all the morons out there took it, and they retweeted it with their quotes of like, oh, they did fill the stadiums, and this is why I've always got time for Man City, because they always fill the stadiums, and that's what matters is filling the stadiums. I've always got time for them, even if their morals have changed because they're owned by people that they shouldn't really like sometimes. It doesn't matter if they've changed, because back in the day they were good people. Just saying. Stupid people retweeting stuff for likes because they know they can pander to people who want to keep this idea that football is still somehow sacred. That these small little pleasures in there haven't all been infiltrated by the big guys and the money. Pep Guardiola, of course, part of it. We have already been in the lower divisions, he says. We will be back. Not a problem, just in case. We will call Paul Dickov, probably not the guy I'd go in League One, but sure. And Mike Summerby, maybe at a loose end. And we will do again. But they should wait. The Premier League put it there, but they should wait. We're going to defend ourselves like we did in the UEFA situation. I will remind you over the last few days, we've obviously heard a lot about how much Man City will pay for their lawyers. Lawyers are expensive things. All right, doesn't matter how much Man City are paying. It's all relative, isn't it? And if you're going to pay a guy 80 grand a day or whatever, or a firm 80 grand a day, to Man City, that's a drop in the ocean. And ultimately, if they believe they're going to be found innocent or they can't be proven guilty, they believe that someone else is going to foot that bill. Of course, Man City did go to CAS when they had UEFA at the door with FFP. And what happened with CAS? Well, CAS didn't actually prove them completely innocent. Some of the alleged charges, of course, let's just put it this way. They wanted to remove them from the Champions League for 2 years, and they also wanted to fine them £30 million. Now, if CAS had found them completely innocent, why would CAS then reduce the fine to 10 million? You do not fine someone who is completely innocent. Or do you? Are we just fining people? Is this cancel culture now, guys? Is this what it is? Fair enough. I'm just saying, there is a grey area in which everyone is now operating. And the Premier League and a couple of other people are suffering at this point. And football fans mostly, but most of us as football fans are suffering because the Premier League and everyone else did not put the regulations in, or at least some of the stop back. They didn't put some of the stops in for some of the big issues to be circumvented. Now, obviously, they didn't see that billionaires at the beginning would come in and kind of have more money than the Premier League could ever imagine in the first place. They never saw that, kind of sports washing and that kind of culture would become a primary part of why someone might buy a Premier League club or even just be invested in the league in the first place, in the majority or a minority stake. And they didn't understand the overall. I mean, I think they did understand this, but the amount of money that was on the table, it was just like, doesn't matter, the money. And then they just dove into the DuckTales pool like Scrooge McDuck and just swam in the money. And the people who made those decisions now aren't there anymore. So the people now have to manage it. And now, obviously, we know there is a government white paper coming out in the next couple of weeks, which is going to basically say that we don't necessarily believe that all of these different bodies can manage themselves and that there has to be some form of regulation put in place, be that law or some regulatory body. And the Premier League has rushed, at least in my humble opinion, through something like this in order to show that they can manage the situation around Man City and around clubs in general, not taking part in what most people consider to be a fair way. Now, again, I'll remind you, UEFA, the horse had bolted with them years ago as well. The Premier League, the horse had bolted with them years ago as well. That doesn't stop the exercise of trying to sort of gain control of the horse or finding a new horse. And when I say find a new horse, the Premier League is trying to keep hold of a lot of the horses that it has in its Liverpools and its Man Uniteds and its Man Cities and its Arsenals. And on the other hand, what they're also trying to do is maximise the amount of money those teams can make and keep those people happy. And clearly, Man City are not happy. I will remind you that softly or in a hard way, certain people at UEFA were reminded when Man City were should we say, charged with whatever it was, that Man City could go nuclear at any point, that Man City would not be too scared to blow everything up, or someone close to Man City would not be too scared to blow everything up. It wouldn't be Man City, of course, because Man City wouldn't do that. We're the good guys. Of course, we all know people who are innocent always go, I'll blow the whole thing up, mate. And people who are innocent always go, oh, I mean, well, let's just wait and see what the conclusion is, shall we? Of course, sometimes they will, if they want to let the plot thicken. But what I'm saying is, Pep Guardiola maybe knows a thing or two that we don't. But maybe Pep Guardiola knows that there is a technicality here, and that there are many technicalities in the rules that mean that Man City may not have technically broken the rules. And there may be a prevailing feeling now that because people, like similar to when the Super League first came along, and I could have done a Super League video yesterday, but it wasn't very well. But similar to the Super League, which billionaires are you backing here, boys? And very often it seems to be that you back the billionaires who you believe have your interest at heart. You back in the guys who either pay your wages, were previously your masters, or at some point have had a crossover with you. For instance, I like Vincent Kompany. He seems like a great guy. And I do get his point. I broadly get the point that football is not an industry which can point fingers, or not an industry that can say, hey, you did wrong over there. It's a dirty, horrible industry, like any industry is. There are very few industries where everyone plays above board. Do you know why? Because that is human nature. And so no one goes, that's human nature, mate. Just get on. Go on, off you go. Because sport is about rules. Sport is about rules. Sport is about putting all these things in place. And of course, the British get very moral. We love to get moral over this stuff. We love to tell someone like Pep Guardiola, oh, but you're with the bad guys, mate. The club proved they were completely innocent, according to Pep Guardiola last time, which is why UEFA still got a £10 million fine. What happened since Monday is the same as what happened with UEFA. We've already been condemned. You have to understand that 19 teams in the Premier League are accusing us without having the ability to defend. I don't think he's talking about what happens on the pitch there. I'm fully convinced we will be innocent. Of course, people who are innocent usually just go, we're innocent. You don't need to convince yourself you're innocent. The language around it is muddy. The language around it is grey. Pep Guardiola is a football legend. What he has done, what he is doing out on the pitch is generational. So why aren't people angry with the people at the very top? The Premier League, the people who own the clubs? Because we trot people like Pep Guardiola out to defend the likes of their own club when they shouldn't have to do that. Pep Guardiola shouldn't have to answer these questions as the first point of contact for Man City. His line, I think, isn't a great line. I get it. Like, if they are proven innocent, and they are innocent with all the charges, because, let's face it, some of these charges have come because of leaks, whether that evidence has been collected properly and whether the Premier League have rushed things. Apparently the other day, someone was saying the Premier League and the accusations that they released later were adjusted because some of the rules that they cited weren't 100% there. And you want to be very sure about the accusations you were making. So, and apparently Man City were also pissed off about things because it came too quick, or there was something about they got off the phone and then Man City was sort of annoyed about this stuff. And so when the phone went down, then, the accusations are already out. As fans, as people who cover this, we know that there are massive issues with this league. We know that Man City are not the only people who have adjusted or bent rules at some point. But do we need a manager to sit there and say this? No. Is it easy for me to sit in an accusing position when I'm a Liverpool fan? Would I be doing the same if it was around Liverpool? Well, my angle on the Super League was that actually, as interesting and thought exercise as it was, I didn't want to see it. Do I think the Super League will happen in the end? Yes. Do I think the Super League didn't happen because we protested, because we as the public didn't want to see it? No. Didn't happen because the right billionaires didn't try and push it through. And when the right billionaires try and push it through, boy, will they get the Super League. So what I'm saying is, what we're watching here is which billionaires you back again. We're back to square one, guys. Back to the same point of who's your billionaire? But question, does that billionaire really have your interest in heart? Do they love you? Does investing in your local area better than your government make them a better person, or make them someone that you should love more than the Conservative Party? A very low bar as far as this crop of Conservatives is concerned for are those people good people or not? So while we're all busy moralising around Man City and stuff like that, my reminder is that Pep Guardiola is in an incredibly difficult situation. He has to find a way to motivate his players. He knows that there is some form of difficulty going on at Man City at the moment where some players may be annoyed, they may be worried about relegation, they may be considering not signing another contract. He knows how difficult that makes his job on the pitch. And he's right. What happened on the pitch was great. But if it was influenced by what happens off the pitch and the amount of investment, that's not a level playing field. So I was on a call, I'll tell you this story, I think this is an interesting one, right? I was on a call a couple of months ago with Gary Neville and Rio Ferdinand and a couple of other journalists and a couple of other fan channels, and it was actually on behalf of the Kickoff and True Geordie, right? True Geordie couldn't make the call, and I could. And so I was on the call and I was listening to them talking about independent bodies and all these kind of things. Now, obviously, since Gary Neville has sort of gone away to Qatar and said what he said, but the point remains, an independent body is still needed to work out what goes on here. Someone like Pep Guardiola would be smart to talk about that instead of talking about how innocent Man City are. But of course, whoever your paymasters are, decide what you say. Should we be condemning Man City before they've even been found guilty of something? No. Is there a lot of evidence that is potentially damning? Yes. Should we be deciding without knowing the details of things X, Y, Z? Probably not. But should we be condemning Man City just yet? Probably not. Do you know why? Not because I feel sorry for Man City. I feel sorry for the fans, but I do not feel sorry for the owners of Man City. I get there might be a greater good that they think they're getting towards. There might be some bigger thing here. The Manchester area has massively benefited from having Man City involved in that area. There has been investment in the area. There's been all these kind of things. I mentioned that on my last video. Mention that, Pep. But what I do think is no one should be condemning people when they don't realise this is not a battle between good and evil on both sides. This is a battle between, hey, he ain't so great and he ain't so great either. So Pep is right. People should not be condemning Man City. But they also shouldn't be condemning the other side either. And they shouldn't necessarily be just standing around and going, hey, football's not perfect, you know? So let's just keep not being perfect. Where's the logic? So I'm sure that there is no moral high ground for anyone in football. But not having the moral high ground, and especially considering what has happened in the last year, does not mean that you have the right to no opinion. Does not mean that you cannot say, if you live in a glass house, then you can't cast stones. And I get it. I'm sure there are plenty of glass houses that policemen live in, and lawmakers and judges and all kinds of people compromise in their life. That doesn't mean that we should go, it's just a dive, a race to the bottom, right? That call really heartened me. And a few months later, I saw Gary Neville doing the Qatar thing, and I was disappointed. But I didn't think, you know what, we shouldn't have an independent body in the UK. So what I'm saying here is these comments I'm disappointed about, and I do condemn them. I don't agree with with the diversionary tactics that Pep Guardiola is trying to employ here. But what I do agree with is that in football, there are no enemies or friends, just interests. Who's going to take our interests into account? Let me know in the comments below. I'll chat to you guys in a while. Much love.